you let just wash over you, and you don't take a lot of stock in any individual scene. I think is how I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think of the movie. It's almost like a it's almost like a graveyard of all of Lynch's ideas kind of mashed up into one
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you
like
want to say hi to my brother?
set of pieces. How's it going, Layton?
Hi.
Have you ever met Henrik?
I don't know. Hi, Henrik. Have we ever met?
I don't know if we have or not. Maybe in DC when you were like a baby.
Ah, okay. I wouldn't remember.
Well, so let me make the official introduction. This is my boy Henrik. I've been friends with this guy since as long as possibly forever, since high school.
Which is the same as forever, as we all know.
Um,
Nice
yeah.
to finally speak with you, Henrik.
Yeah.
Justin always has good things to say about you.
Well, yeah, I hope so.
yeah, of course,
Yes.
for sure.
Oh yeah, it's good. It's good to see
And
you.
never anything bad. Promise.
Well, yeah, right. Winky face.
Yeah.
Winky face.
So what did you think of that movie? Have you ever seen
So
Mulholland Drive? Is my first
Leighton
question.
watched the last third of it.
Yeah, yeah. You came in like kind of near the cabaret scene, I think.
Yeah, I came in. She was being interviewed. She was interviewed. No, she's answering questions from the guy in the room.
Oh, one
Not
of the
very
guys.
specific.
Well, but how many scenes like that are there?
There's so many.
She's he goes out and he's like, yeah, Kip, he's around here.
Oh, Clem. What was the guy's name? Klimp.
Kurt.
Yeah.
Quart. But yeah, that's where I came in there, and then she was like walking around the city, and then she went up and started snapping the women, got stabbed, and pulled a holy mountain. Have you ever seen that movie?
Have you seen Hodorowski, The Holy Mountain? Oh, you should see that.
Yeah,
That's as weird as it can fucking get.
Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway. Like, this movie makes them look like summer blockbusters, because this one's real bizarre. But I didn't want to keep you too much from your debriefing. I just wanted to say hi, and if you've ever heard tell of the Sleech, I thought to give you a proper introduction.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can do a three-way movie sometime.
Yeah, maybe we can. You know what I would really like to... Have you ever heard of a movie called Sorry to Bother You?
I actually have just watched that recently, and it's really good. Yeah,
Right?
I'd be down to do a watch of that.
Would you recommend that for...
Yeah, that's the movie about telemarketing. Right? Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
and
Yeah.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Would
I
you
don't want to
recommend...
give away too much, but yeah, there's.
So I'm always trying to make like Justin watch like cartoons for 14-year-olds and stuff, and make him read fantasy novels. But I've been recommending that to him recently. So would you say that that's a movie that Justin could enjoy?
Yeah, I think you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's
Well,
it's,
there you go.
it's goofy and silly, but it also definitely has like a message to it.
Yeah. And it's pretty funny too. It's a pretty funny movie. So
Yeah, it's definitely like a pretty good satire.
there you go.
All right, always in the mood for pretty good satire.
There you go. All right. Well, good talking to you, Henrik.
Yeah.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I did hit record, but if you don't want to go public with this, I don't care. Whatever, it's up to you.
Do what you will. I'll give you my sign away my digital rights.
Okay, to your likeness, to your words and likeness.
Exactly.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just curious. I've only seen it once. You've seen it twice, so I'm curious what rewatching it has to offer. You said you think it's like a graveyard for all his ideas. Did you have other?
Yeah, so I mean, I know a little bit about some of the things in it. So, for instance, like the rabbit scenes and all of that, or those scenes in particular are kind of like pieces of shorts that he has done like in the independently.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think they were kind of done around the time of Mulholland Drive or in that time period because Naomi Watts does like the voice of one of them. So
Mm-hmm.
there's like, some weird connection there. But I just think that there's a lot into it that if you watch some of the Lynch shorts, a lot of the kind of weird vignette scenes that don't seem to have like really much connection at all, which is takes up, you know, I don't know, large chunks of that central section of the movie.
Right.
I think that they are, I think they're just like ideas that, yeah, I think they're just like kind of his idea of, what YouTube has become. Like just like this kind of like pop, like scatter shot of like bright
Mm-hmm.
ideas kind of fading and popping out. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, with that same Lynch, like, dark, like everything's decaying sort of undertone. But,
Mm-hmm.
like that's how I see that section kind of in his mind. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Do you think? Can you see it? Can you view it from internally? Like, do those things? Is there some level where they belong in the movie, or is it only just a montage?
no, I know. I definitely think that they belong. I mean, like it, I don't ever feel like it. I mean, like narratively, it's definitely not. There's not like I don't think there's a strong undercurrent of narrative throughout a large portion of it. But I will say that it never loses steam. Like it's not like I'm just watching 50 clips in a row. Like they
Mm-hmm.
definitely are placed and set in a way that makes me, want to continue on.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, it's that thread of just like Laura Dern's face and shock and awe that kind of like, you know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
ties it together. Um, and
I feel like this movie is very suitable for like a Room 237 type treatment.
yeah, yeah,
That's what I want to get is like a bunch of like that would be a good project. Just show this to a bunch of people and then get them to like try and take it apart afterwards. So in that Room 237 spirit, was there any parts that you like even, not that you have to come up with a coherent like symbolic reading of the whole thing, but is there parts that you have like a psychological interpretation or symbolic interpretation for?
I think that there's certainly like this, um, this kind of like I guess this is more of just not an overall tone, but it just definitely throughout the whole thing, it's all kind of about, to me, it's kind of about decomposition of society and like this like
Mm-hmm.
sense that everything is kind of, and I mean it's kind of encapsulated at the end there with like that weird line where the lady's like, "Oh, you're dying," that's it, like that just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that kind of matter of factness of like everything around us kind of returning to its basis levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like, you see that especially for me in those scenes where it goes from like a confrontation between lovers or husband and wife or whatever, and then like without seemingly any like build up, it just goes immediately to like shock and awe, bang, smash,
Mm-hmm.
like beat ups type stuff. That just kind of like quick, fast gratification. Everything has to be like kind of, there's no build up anymore. Things are just like hit me in the face with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess there's not like specific spots in general. That's just kind of like the overall mood that I get. And I mean, those, and especially in some of those scenes, the Polish scenes where there's like a lot of that, even the like kind of that very first scene in the movie where like faces are blurred out and like talking to the horror and like
Mm-hmm.
I just think that there's this kind of general undertone of, kind of society returning to its base moral instincts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's kind of my psychological interpretation.
Yeah, I buy that.
I
I
mean,
was
I
think.
believe like those, I mean, there's so many other parts to it too. Like I think like the one part from it's funny because this is one of those movies that like images really stuck out with me when I first watched it, and I'm trying to understand now, like after seeing it again, like why those particular images stuck out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think could be interesting to really dive into with something like this is, what is up with all those those weird close-up shots like throughout the whole movie? It's just like it's very jarring, and it's something when I first saw it, I was like, I was like 17 when I first saw this, and I was like, I thought I was like, that's just like shitty filming, like
Mm-hmm.
why is the camera like out of focus in someone's face?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have like any idea of why that happened. I don't really know, but it's very jarring to me and disturbing, and I don't know.
I think it's just he's just using the medium for more like psychological compression. Like even though it is very jarring, and from one point of view you could view it as shitty filming, like the emotional impact, if you are really taking, if you're really taking it in, the emotional impact of some of these scenes delivered this close, like as if you were standing that close to the person. I think that's the thing he understands, is that you can move the camera and make people imagine that they themselves are where the camera is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like if you were that close to someone's face, or in other words, if that person's energy was that like urgent and like present and inescapable. So in a way, I guess I could say it's like a psychological experience. Like I've been in a room with somebody who, even though I was standing 10 feet from them, it was like they were in a close-up, you know what I mean? Because they were so fucking intense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and of course, like now I don't view it as like a bad thing at all. I just view it as kind of, I mean, I think that was the intent, right? Like I'll never forget that woman's face at the beginning. Like it's so like, it's just so fearing to see that. And then you see it throughout the movie, he uses that technique more, but like that first image of it is just like so powerful, and it just creates such a
I read somebody say once that like Lynch just wants to get inside your head, but he doesn't care. Like he's not doing it to any purpose. Like he's just constantly, his art is almost just constantly trying to just get inside the viewer's brain with no purpose beyond to get as deeply inside as he can through just intensity and things like that.
Yeah.
Did you? Speaking of recurring things, did you have an opinion about the girl who's watching it all on the TV screen?
Yeah. I think that. So I think for me, like there's kind of like what I was saying before, is how like kind of looking at it as kind of this decomposition of society, and kind of the internet is like this place of junk.
Mm-hmm.
And when this was made, I think like this movie is so interesting because like looking at it from 2020 perspective versus 2006, 2007, whenever this came out, like around that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird because like then, I mean, like compared to now, like how much technology affects our social communication is just exponentially increased. But, like I think that like for Lynch, I think that's part of it. Like the woman crying, seeing like how everything has now become digital. Where obviously in quarantine now it seems like even obviously more extreme. But like just that idea that like people have lost connections with each other and only view emotions in technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there could be a deeper interpretation of it, but I mean, I think that's at least at a certain level, like kind of on the surface.
I also think that issue of communication technology, let's put it as generally as possible, right? The internet is one manifestation, but the issue of communication technology, a lot of times that seems to be an area that Lynch interests himself as well as a filmmaker, like meta filmmaking. He likes to make films about filmmaking. He likes to remind you at periodic intervals that you're watching a film.
Right.
And I feel like that's a mechanism to do that. Like, you're watching Laura Dern, he'll do, there's kind of a cycle in the movie where you get more and more invested in her thing, and then it turns out to be a movie, or you get more and more invested in her thing, and then it's on the girl's TV, or, you know what I mean? It kind of keeps, like, turning out to be false. He kind of keeps, like, pulling the rug out from under it repeatedly.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's, I mean, there's like multiple parts where I just found myself laughing like in this absurdity of like him breaking the fourth wall in those kind of ridiculous ways. Like
Right.
I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily right, but like the scene when he asks for the paper towels and he has like ridiculous ketchup stain, like I just like balls out laughing, like. There's just like some like points in it.
And then like 12 Polish like working class like dirty looking people like roll out of his back door into his like barbecue area.
Like it's just like yeah, and I mean you can see that like kind of remind you of making a film in the like direct like when yeah, you pull out there's a camera right there, you
Mm-hmm.
pull out the TV screen. But then there's those moments that are just like so absurd that it only could be part of a Hollywood movie, like,
Right. And
like
also, I think that effect, like what you're talking about visually with the ketchup stain, throughout the whole movie, he's also doing that all the time with the dialogue. Like the amount of things in the movie that people say that no real person would ever say.
right.
Like these sentences that kind of don't, that sound super wooden and don't fit together. Or like, she'll just turn and be like, he's the one who was in the attic. Or like,
Yeah.
or talking in a style that real human beings don't really talk. It's like sometimes I think in this movie it's like Hollywood eating its own tail kind of thing. Like he's just deconstructing it so much.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it. Yeah, I mean it's like a continuation. Like it's almost taking like the Mulholland Drive critiques of Hollywood to their ultimate extreme, like as
Mm-hmm.
far as you can go, and then
And then and then immediately right there on the street in Hollywood, which is also true, the junkies, the death, like yeah, which is
yeah,
also
yeah,
part of Hollywood. Yeah.
yeah, like oh yeah, no, I mean like it. Not only is it showing like the seedy underbelly, but it's showing like the, um, like the artificial nature of the dreams that Hollywood creates.
Mm-hmm.
Kind
I
of
think.
like,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, it kind of like hits it at both ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. I think, in a weird way, then, feeling that throughout, that kind of like ringing falseness that keeps happening over and over again, it seemed. So knowing that Lynch is a meditator and into yoga and all this stuff, I'm always also trying to like read a spiritual reading as well with his stuff. And I think one thing that I found odd was that the realist seeming part of the movie, in a weird way, the most honest, the least insincere part of the movie was the rabbits. Because in that room, somehow, even though it was very surreal, somehow the art, for lack of a better term, was more earnest instead of ironic. And then I was wondering, like, what are these rabbits about? And at one point, I was like, oh, the rabbits are like the spiritual plane. They're like the plane. They're like where there's actual truth behind all of the lies. But it's so like I don't know. Not that I have a good like conclusion to that line of thought, but they're like representing an abstract plane of truth, like maybe a plane of ideals that is contrasting to the like the falsity of illusion and appearances in the rest of the movie.
What do you take of like the laugh tracks?
Ah, I see, but yeah, then he'll then he'll do that. Yeah.
I see what you're saying though, because there is that like the one moment where the rabbits do interact is that kind of like one moment where there's like kind of that one of her more desperate moments, and she like kind of can touch it for a second. It's almost like the Adam and God finger thing.
Yeah. She's communicating to the plane. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but then again, then there's that like quintessential like absurdity, like laughter tracks.
So I think you can also see a lot of it as things, of course, things happening in her head. And I was the whole, for a long period at the beginning of the movie, I really thought, okay, this is a movie about her psychological. You were saying societal decomposition. I was saying on the individual level. I was thinking this is her psychological decomposition around her guilt and fear around her having an affair. And I think I know that one of Lynch's kind of themes that he likes to touch on is actions have consequences, kind of moral. And the idea of like, oh, this sexy Hollywood affair, doesn't that sound fun? But then actually showing how it just like shatters into all this violence and her. I really liked, for example, the scene of her talking to when she first meets that like group of other girls that it's implied slept with the Justin Theroux character. Because I think that's a really real psychological moment. I don't care what gender you are. If you sleep with somebody and you are, you know, and it's really intense and you're into them, there's a point in time where you sit and have an imaginary conversation or confrontation with all of their previous lovers, right?
Yeah.
So I think that moment is very is very psychologically real.
Oh yeah, and I mean like that like that scene in particular that's another one that like really stood out. Like the first time I watched it again, like stood out to me. And the lighting in that scene is like very noteworthy to me. Like I don't exactly know like why it like hits me viscerally, but like those like spotlights on the faces, it almost makes it like I don't know, like it, you know, part of it, and you know, and like Lynch obviously likes the noir, like you know, like kind of like every once in a while. It reminds me of kind of this what you would do to like someone to like interrogate them, like tell me about this, you know, like it brings that into it, which I mean also kind of plays into what you were just. I mean, like you know, like if you were talking to someone who was a former lover of someone you care about, like you want to know everything, you know, you're like kind of trying to grab them. You know, and that's one of those like kind of.
And I feel like we do that, not literally. Like I don't, you know, it's not that I've had that many encounters with former lovers of my lovers in my life, but inside my mind I have.
Right.
Constantly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like that's what I mean. Like in your mind.
I think the ending of that scene kind of even to me followed a psychological logic in that like they stop talking about him at a certain point, and then they're just like admiring that one girl's boobs, and to me that's like her psychology regressing back, right? Underneath the issue of what do I mean to this guy and how's he going to treat me and what chips are on his shoulder, hiding behind that is really just her concern of like, am I hot, body image, acceptance, like all of those psychological messages. And that's what happens is these girls who are at first like kind of like the lovers of like again the former lovers of her lover end up turning into just like generic female societal pressure voices of almost.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of the role they play throughout the rest of the movie, right? But it's interesting to think that, like, yeah, it goes from kind of this more, I don't know, aggressive kind of relationship, kind of this foil, to like some sort of just kind of casual passing the time, girl talk type conversation, or I guess what Lynch would imagine girl talk is.
Right.
But and then after that, going to this kind of level of acceptance, which you see in like the dance, you know, like where they're kind of all like enjoying each other's company.
No relationship dynamic is stable either. Like whoever is at each other's throats, a couple scenes later is going to be pals or you know, that seems to be generalizable throughout the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the only constant is that like Laura Dern is having some sort of psychological breakdown throughout.
Right, she's having a bad time with all of them. I like her, I like her various roles, and the one that I find really satisfying is that her like with the injury on her lip and like narrating. Yeah. But see, that's another part of the movie. Like, she says a bunch of shit that no person would ever really say. A bunch of those lines are so weird that come out of her mouth during that part.
Well, and see, in that part, I don't know if you've seen the like little Netflix short that that one Netflix just picked up one of the new shorts called Where Did Jack Go? I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
It's like this. It's recent. It's from like 2017 and 2018, and it's like a short. This like, I had never seen that before, but now looking at it, now I can totally see this resemblance. It's a scene where Lynch himself is playing like a gumshoe style, like 40s noir detective, kind of like the guy in that, and he's questioning a monkey about like murder, and like that's the entire. It's like 15 minutes long. But like that's like in that scene, there's all of those weird kind of like lines that you might find in a Raymond Chandler novel, like I think like that exact same thing is being played out here, where he's like poking fun at old time Hollywood and the way that they just kind of created an entire sense of being, making it so absurd that like now like you can see the falsity in it, but at the time that was kind of accepted as like a Hollywood great.
Right, or like even people could watch it without realizing how fake it was at the time. That's one. It's like a weird thing about culture in general, is to not recognize the culture form as a form of artifice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And and that kind of goes into kind of what I was saying about this, how I see it as kind of this like critique of culture, and just of kind of culture eating itself in general, and just kind of this like mash of everything. Is that, like, eventually, I think that there's a big one of the things that I think he's trying to say in the movie is like, what is this all anyway? It's definitely got this like postmodern, like kind of nihilistic undertone to the whole thing. That it kind of plays into that sort of narrative as well.
I think speaking of that interrogation or interview scene, the guy who's sitting there and never talks, is
Still talks on the phone. Yeah.
What's that?
Well, he goes in and talks on the phone.
Oh, I forgot that.
During the interrogation.
Maybe I didn't even realize that was the same guy. But yeah, I think, another thing Lynch is great at is just doing something so long that it becomes incredible. Like, how many shots of this guy not saying anything? It's like, at first you're like, ooh, he's building up suspense, like this guy's gonna say something badass. But after 2 hours, he still hasn't said anything. Your brain's just like, who the fuck is this?
Didn't he say the one thing when she was talking about the guy coming at her with the crowbar, and he was like, were you in fact seeing another man or something? I think there was like
he does ask her that. You're right. So my memory of it is imperfect, but it's kind of that effect you're talking about, of certain things just stick in your brain. Like, even though I just sat through that movie, the thing that I remember is that guy not saying anything, not the two things he did say.
Yeah, it's definitely like that's like one of the crazy things about this movie, and honestly, kind of tying it back to 237 and The Shining. Another trait that these two movies share is that there is like a specific power and specific images in the movie that like dig into your brain, like in a way that like very few movies can do that, like, and this movie has that quality, which is like a rare quality movie. You don't see it too often.
Yeah, it takes. I mean, I think it takes skill to execute, but it also just takes balls on the director to whatever, do the thing that he knows is going to fuck with people's heads. I think most mortal people without extremely strong artistic convictions would shy away.
Yeah, and I mean, and like the reality of it too is you have to be someone who has the like blue blood streak of like that you can get a producer to be like,
right,
hey, yeah, like
right. You have to have some pedigree to let you try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like but I mean, one thing I love about Lynch is his pedigree is, I mean, he's kind of self-made. I mean, Eraserhead came from nowhere, and then he fucking had this weird. He almost got hired to direct Return of the Jedi, which is crazy. Yeah. And then he had Elephant Man and Dune back to back. Yeah. So okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean like it is kind of amazing considering like, I don't really know the financial record of Lynch's films too much, but I can't imagine that many of them were that financially successful. He continued to like, especially after Twin Peaks, like like the movies after that, most of them were like pretty avant-garde, and like, yeah, he could still continue to like build cred and build like, production value into like Mulholland Drive, and I mean, frankly, this movie too has like a lot of production value
Absolutely, yeah.
for like an avant-garde, like absurd movie. I mean, like look at Laura Dern and Jeremy Irons are like they're like A-list actors. They're not like like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
No, and you got William H. Macy with a fucking 2-second cameo.
Yeah, exactly.
So another aspect that I was thinking of with as far as constructing a spiritual reading of sorts was, okay, so suppose that this is about the psychological breakdown of Laura Dern, but it's not about her cheating. What if it's more general than that? It's just about the kind of the dynamic of the mind when it's under the influence of fear. And it's just this kind of, like what, I think this is familiar to any of us. Anytime you're going to make a decision and your brain is just like spinning out the worst case scenarios, it could be kind of a journey through her worst case scenarios. And I was of just various things, her relationship, her life outcome, her everything. Because you always, you can think along all those dimensions when you start thinking that way. And, but I was thinking the girl who's watching the TV screen and crying, that's like her kind of ego or consciousness watching the succession of her worst fears, which is playing out in her mind. And so I took it that when Laura Dern comes in and hugs the girl, it's like, even though it's two different actresses, I'm seeing it as her and herself, right?
Right.
The consciousness watching her own life. And I see Laura Dern coming in as like, almost like the voice of the future coming back, like speaking with wisdom to the voice of fear, saying, listen, like it is going to be horrible, but it's also going to be fine. Like, yes, you're going to go through all the things that you just saw me go through on the screen, but here's a hug and comfort because you're also going to be fine because, that's how life is. You're safe on a philosophical, existential, spiritual level.
Yeah, no, I will say I say that as a very like positive reading too, like like in the sense that like there is some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And
I think that's part of it for him because I think I've heard him say in interviews that one of the reasons he puts the worst imaginable things on screen is that he thinks that imagining them and mounting them on screen is kind of like overcoming them on the spiritual level. Like if you can wrap your mind around it and aestheticize it and make it into art, it proves that you can assimilate the worst things in life somehow. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. I think that makes sense to me. It's like almost like a cathartic experience, like live it out through the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one thing that we haven't mentioned, which I think is clearly a major role, at least in my mind, is like the duality of time and kind of the nature of time. It seems to be like clearly like a major theme in the movie. I'm not like it's one of those themes throughout the movie that I'm like aware it's there and I'm not really sure how it fits into anything, but like I mean, like I don't know, I just like the clock in general is like kind of spinning out of control throughout the movie. In some ways it reminds me of like the kind of the shifts in Inland Empire, but then like rolled with like a D12 dice, so then there's like 10 of them.
Right.
And I just watched a movie last night where the movie is like 2 hours long. The first hour and the second hour are the exact same kind of scene, just like shot with the actors doing slightly different takes and like how it goes differently, almost like throwing out this like parallel universe idea. And so maybe that was why it was kind of on my mind, but it just seemed like there's definitely this idea of like, and I guess what you were just saying too, like seeing the future or like coming to terms with the future,
Mm-hmm.
um, while at the same time just kind of like living experiences of the horrors of the past.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can kind of like one thing I thought about the time thing. I don't know if you put any stock in this, but I think that you can view the Polish scenes as kind of these, as history repeating itself, and these
Yeah.
like portals of the situation repeating over itself, and
Yeah.
kind of like seeing that play out throughout the
Mm-hmm.
movie.
Yeah. I definitely felt like, uh, yeah, the Polish scenes were like the same timeline playing out in a different plane of reality because they're also stylistically different. Like, not only do the events look old, but the filmmaking looks old. It's suddenly you look like you're in a 60s, 70s, high budget period drama type of feel. That one thing he does throughout the movie is he doesn't keep the filmmaking language consistent at all. And you'll even be in the middle of a scene, suddenly there's like a camcorder shot, like suddenly the color palette totally changes because he's using a different kind of video for 2 seconds and then back to what you were doing before. But so the Polish one definitely had a very particular feel. All of those scenes with the architecture, the costuming, but also the angles, the way it was shot, the way it was cut, all were of a piece of just a strange time and place. And it was so jarring every time it hit too. Not just that they're in Poland, but that they're like in a almost different plane of reality from whatever's happening to the Laura Dern timeline.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even know if it's meant to be taken, in a plot terminology, but I mean, like, if you view everything under the lens of like some sort of ghost of the past coming from some sort of first folk tale, I mean, you can see it in that, like, just a very literal sense, like the people that created the curse are like, what's happening with perpetuating the curse. It's
Which
almost
is
like kind of like an original sin sort of a idea.
it kind of happens in you know what movie that reminds me of is Serious Man.
Right.
Like, yeah, there's the kind of little fable at the beginning, and
Yeah.
then there's a curse, and then unrelated. But see, I was reading a really interesting. Have you ever read David Foster Wallace's essay about David Lynch?
Mm-hmm.
He was on the set of Lost Highway, and he was apparently a big Lynch fan, and he wrote a article about getting to be on the set and watch it, and what he thought about Lynch. And one thing that he pointed out that I had not previously realized was the fact that like these filmmakers of a certain avant-garde, modernist, postmodernist bent that I like people like the Coen brothers, also Quentin Tarantino, Paul Thomas Anderson, were all people that David Foster Wallace named. Lynch is a generation older than them. Like, he started 10 years to 15 years before all those people. And David Foster Wallace was making the argument that David Lynch, with Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, kind of like kicked open a door that then made, like, in other words, would a Serious Man be possible if David Lynch hadn't opened certain kind of storytelling doors? Even though Serious Man is much more, less fucking weird, but... Or even Barton Fink or a movie like that.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like inheritors of a tradition of sorts. I guess what I'm saying.
No, I mean, I see that a lot. I mean, just in the way that just personally, how I think about movies. I mean, that like opening shot of Blue Velvet where it goes from the house like down into the ground is just like one of those like images in a movie that like kind of fundamentally changed the way I think about what movies can be about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like definitely I mean, that and Fargo to me like kind of opened my eyes to like what movies can kind of be like. Frankly,
Yeah.
like, so yeah, no, I definitely see that. I mean, they like, yeah, all those guys have different bends to them, but yeah, I mean, like especially for Lynch and like and the Coens to an extent, like that kind of. I mean, the Coens are so much more into like kind of Americana and things like that. I guess Lynch is too, in like a different way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like the um yeah, now I'm just imagining like what Lynch would do with the Western. But
Well, I bet he loves them, you know, because I feel like he's definitely a student of like the golden age movies in general.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, even in a movie that's as like crazy out there as an Inland Empire, like you can see like the ghosts of the 40s and 50s movies like throughout it. I mean, like there's so many,
Mm-hmm.
like even like the ridiculousness um of Laura Dern or whatever the Nikki whoever her last name was, the character's house, like with the overly formal butler and like the reading room and like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all of these like things that look like they should be from some sort of like period manners drama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I mean it's definitely like just an illusion, but like it does feel like that. It feels very odd. In a way.
It kind of yeah, all of those aspects too, like the 40s and 50s. I guess it makes me circle back to the theme of like past and future impinging on each other, like So you were talking about we were talking about the Polish timeline and the whatever the modern day timeline, but also within the structure of the movie of itself, or of a lot of the things people say, you have this feeling too of like things reaching back into the past to affect events that happened before them, like or numerous times when people say things like I don't know what happened first. She keeps saying that. I don't know what happened first. I couldn't tell if it happened before or after, or when the woman in the beginning is saying like, if today were tomorrow, like if it were tomorrow, you'd be over there.
Right.
This kind of like the future and the present blurring into each other, and then the old school filmmaking, which is getting so much homage paid to it, is also like the opposite, like the past reaching up to pull the present back towards it, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and like the other kind of current of that is the continually characters asking like what time it is, like what
Mm-hmm.
time is it now, like oh it is like progressively getting later, but then there's that like opening shot right at the very beginning where it's like I don't know if it was 9:45 right now I would think it was after midnight, and then of course like it starts at 9:45 and then the last character on the street says after midnight. What time is it really throughout the entire thing?
Right.
Like it like I mean, like to me that part of it almost just plays like a dream, like where you can't see a clock in a dream, like that kind of
Mm-hmm.
idea. But yeah, I mean, I honestly don't see too much of it as a dream. Like I don't really see much of it at all as a dream. I think it's like I see what you're saying is kind of this like psychological anxiety like breakdown sort of idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily a dream. I think that's like literally like living out the like horror fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
As unless I don't. Do you think it's like there's a lot of dream sequences within it?
Well, I think I in the way I was reading it, dream sequences not so much, but yeah, events that don't literally happen, yes,
Right.
like I said, a psychological dramatization, almost like a lot of these characters. I kept thinking of a lot of them as sort of personas in her mind, or archetypes in her mind, that represent possibilities or types of people that she is then like playing out scenarios with, like little dolls, the way we do, like the way we fabricate hypotheticals in order to like do our world gaming. And like, I don't know about you, but like, if I'm gonna make a decision, or even if I'm just gonna say something or write something or hold an opinion, I go through this whole like list of people in my mind, like, what would such and such person think of that? A father figure. What would this person who I want to think I'm cool think of that? What would this person who I think has power over me think of that? What would this person who, um, you know, I'm scared of think of that? And So I feel like he was a certain amount of it is him putting that on screen. And again, the girls, the other lovers scene is kind of that coming to a point. But I think a lot of it was that, like, what would so and so think if they found this out, or what would happen if X, Y, or Z happened, is playing out in the movie as if it looks like a real event, but really it's somebody's psychology, like, morphing it through hypothetical universes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, that's kind of, yeah. So I guess if you want to call them like daydreams in a way, you know, like, but yeah, definitely I see it more as like as visualizations of either things that have happened or will happen, or things that you think that are going to happen if X happens, or you know, that's sort of gaming out. I'll ask you one thing, because this is something that I had only picked up the second time I watched it. I don't really know, like, and I mean, so I texted you at the beginning. I really like the director's assistant. For some reason, he like stuck out to me this time.
Say it again.
The director's assistant,
the Nixonian guy.
Yeah, like, and I'm trying, like, and so this, when I was watching it, I was really kind of focusing on him. I don't really see how he fits in too well to the entire thing. But I do, like, there is this idea of, like, kind of like, in the folktale tradition, kind of, you've got this idea of, like, this character that's like the, kind of the person who's warning, the warning character. Or like, I don't know enough about, like, folklore, but I know that that's like an archetypal character. It seems like he plays that role in this thing. But then, of course, he has this thing with the animals, and that makes me think he's maybe more like I don't know, kind of just like a base, like, village idiot, sort of like calming presence. I don't know. I was having a hard time with that. Like, I'm trying to fit how he pieced it in. I don't know if you picked up on anything with him or not.
I hardly really remember. I remember because in the last half of the movie he's not very present. He's much more in the first half. He kind of fades away, right?
Yeah, in a way. He has that long monologue where he talks about, like, the nature of animals, and then, like,
what does he say there? I don't even remember that.
It's like early on in the movie, he's talking with Joseph Thoreau, Laura Dern's character, and he's talking about how he owns animals, and he likes the nature of animals, and he likes how they, like, react and think about things.
Yeah, he likes to watch dogs. He says he likes to watch dogs. I've seen yeah, now I remember. I've seen dogs think through any scenario you can think of.
Right.
Get out of it, or whatever he says. Get out, react to any scenario you can think of, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a scene where he's like kind of right before Duran, like, kind of goes down the literal rabbit. There's a scene where he's like, they just briefly shoot to him. He's like talking with what seem like production assistants or something like that off to the side, and he's like handing them things. And then later on in one of the Polish scenes, there's a character that gives almost the identical monologue about dogs and animals as he does earlier on. And, like,
see, I probably missed that because I had the fucking subtitles off. The first half of all the Polish scenes, I honestly thought that they were meant to be nonsense. Like, I honestly was like, oh, part of this movie is people, like, speaking gibberish. I honestly thought that. And the thing is, it's so Lynch, I was like, okay, fine. Like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, like, that actually wouldn't be out of character.
Yeah, because they're still great scenes. Like, even, I tell you this, like, even with the no language, like, there's so much energy, character, like, those scenes are totally full of life, even if you don't know the words. I can tell you that right now.
Well, and I think kind of one thing that we've been kind of circling around a lot is just, like, the visceral power of the images. And, like, you don't need the words to grasp a lot of what's going on, right?
And not just the images, but the character dynamics. Like, you'll set up a scene. You don't know what these people have to do with each other, but he immediately shows you like this person has something on this person, or like this person is afraid of this person. There's some kind of power dynamic, or this person wants something, and that he keeps actually showing you that almost in an archetypal way. You don't actually know what the situation is, but he just shows you these dynamics, and almost I this might be wrong to say, but almost the whole movie is in like. Not the entire movie, but a huge percentage of the movie is in two-person scenes, and then he just keeps doing different pairings of interpersonal dynamics that fuck with your head as much as the images or the soundtrack or anything else. Just knowing the way these people are interacting fucks with your head, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of two-person scenes, and you notice, I kind of, maybe this isn't accurate, I don't know, like, it feels like a lot of the two-person scenes are the ones where he's doing the extreme close-ups of two people, and then doing shot-to-shot, back-to-back of them, like, interacting with each other, which really just, like, heightens that tension in your chest, like, you're like, oh my gosh, these people are, like, how you throat, you know, like, they're, like,
yeah.
Really
yep,
going.
I agree.
Go for it.
Well, and I think this just goes under the idea of a theme, I guess, but the one of the dynamics that he is hitting on repeatedly is fear of being found out, like whether that's fear that your private conversation was going to be made public, fear that a thing you did is going to be found out, like the scene where she and him are talking and then it turns out they're on the movie set, you know, and the director's like, what the hell is going on? Like, that scene is like, was to me anyway, like throat-grippingly terrifying. Like, what if you're, I mean, I don't know, like, I've done some shady shit. I haven't done like really, really shady criminal evil shit, but you know, I've had conversations I certainly don't hope go, you know, were said on a movie set or shit like that. So yeah, on the basic level of just like human paranoia, those scenes are very powerful, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be things that have been actually said or done, like thoughts that you had that you would never want to.
That's right, for sure.
Yeah, like there's this, there's certainly that. I don't know, like there's another thing that like, I think Lynch does a really good job of in this movie, and in general, but this movie in particular, it kind of really distills it down to like the power of color. Like there's a lot of like really cool, you know, like the red light when she initially enters kind of the whatever that kind of second light, and you know, you can tell immediately like using red as this kind of like universal sign of danger or like sinister, you know, behavior, and then kind of the like, I don't know, kind of sardonic use of paint in the house, like this sort of like happy-go-lucky thing, but like clearly that nothing's right in the situation. You know, like I don't know, like those two images in particular, and then like I don't know, the green carpet is just so unsettling looking. Like it just looks like what is that? It's like almost like AstroTurf, but it's like not. You know, it's like this like strange. I don't know, like something that would be from the 70s. But
Are you talking about In the Rabbit Room?
Yeah, exactly. Like just like that. I don't know, man. Like, is it supposed to be like AstroTurf because they're rabbits? I guess like I haven't actually like that.
I didn't think about that. I just think it's just it's just like striking image, like bold. I didn't think of it being AstroTurf in particular. But see, that scene has such a feeling of like ideal plane, and the colors is part of it. There's like pure primary colors. There are like weird deep shades, but there's like these pure flat colors on the walls and floor. And the way they move is so like angular. They like move on right angles, and their faces don't have any subtlety, right? They just have these heads that never change. Something about that. The level of abstraction. It kind of reminds me of Einstein on the Beach. Those rabbit scenes. It's just like abstract behavior of things on a very abstract plane. I guess I'm not putting that very well, but it's something in that vicinity. Those remind me of. So you were saying something you said. Oh, you were talking about how in the house, like the cheery nature of the house, is contrasted with the feeling that like this is not, nothing is really right. And that's also a thing he's doing throughout the movie. Is like for example, that one scene where the jazz, the like Dave Brubeck, yep, ba da 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 da, and it's like even though like the kind of the terrified, paranoid storyline is still continuing. There's this whole part where he's kind of like, "Isn't this fun?" Like, da, 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 which is very goes along with that postmodern reading too of just like, oh, he's commenting on the ability of the medium to be trite or to be false or to be to lie to you, basically.
Yeah, and like, there's a that moment in particular, but there's a couple of moments in it where I feel like the music is specifically designed to like highlight that artificial nature. Like where it's like the scene and the music are distinctly made not to match up, and
right.
like, that's the whole point. I mean, the first half is right at the beginning. She's like talking at the. She's like, "Oh, I got the part," and they're all cheering, and there's this like super ominous like drone in the background.
Right. Which that one's like trademark Lynch, right? Like ominous drone during non-ominous happenings is like is he's done it before, but then he also flips it. He does like ominous happenings with like tweedledee, which he also, I mean, he has a penchant for that before too. I can think of, like in Blue Velvet, he's always had a penchant for this I don't know, dichotomy between poppy, sanitized poppy. Well, like in Blue Velvet, like half the scenes look like they're from like Leave It to Beaver, and they talk like everybody's so earnest and golly and gosh, and then like the most hideous like sexual assault scene like you've ever fucking seen is in the same movie.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the scenes with like Laura Dern and like her family are all just like, oh jeez,
Or even when Kyle MacLachlan tells her the plan, I always think of that scene in the diner. Like he's so naive, and he's like, sometimes you just have to follow a mystery in life, and it's like you sound like a Hardy Boy.
Yeah, like Scooby Doo or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you take of the like actual like Lynch music in the movie?
Well, okay, so it was funny when we watched it. Supposing that this video ends up on YouTube, to explain to our viewers, right? When we watched it, we watched a version that has English closed captions, and they were also acting as the English subtitles for the Polish portion, which is why I said I had turned them off, and that's why I missed some of the Polish scenes. But one thing on those closed captions is it shows the lyrics of all the songs that happen in the background of the movie. But if you saw that movie, and I'm assuming you can confirm this from having seen it before, and you didn't have those closed captions on, those songs would be on only a semi-conscious kind of level, and you wouldn't really pay attention to all those things that are said. But when you do look at them, when you have them spelled out there on the screen, you realize that just like so many of the lines of dialogue we were talking about, they're kind of just like little snippets of unrelated nonsense, or little kind of turns of phrase that don't quite mean anything or go anywhere or have any reference. So I thought that was interesting, and I think I'm assuming most of those songs were, at least co-written by him, even the ones that he wasn't singing. But yeah, then there's like few moments where it's definitely just Dave Lynch singing, and I'm into it. You know what? That the one where he's singing, it's strange. What does he say? It's strange what a lover can do to you, something like that. Strange what can happen to when someone you're in love, or something like that.
Like, and that plays a kind of the, kind of the shift between like the first act and the second act, where it's really like it just kicks into gear right at about that moment.
Right, and I would have said, now as as somebody who didn't know what was coming, I would have said that movie was already in fucking gear, right? Like,
but yeah, like.
I mean, Mulholland Drive does the same thing. Like, the first part of the movie, I'm like, this is like the craziest shit I've ever seen. And then in the last part, he's like, you thought that was crazy? Like,
yeah, like,
yeah, but I thought it was cool, actually. As I was listening to it, I was like, I don't know, it's original, it's creative, it's got a good sound. Like I mean, let me put it this way: even though I think the idea that David Lynch is a recording artist is laughable on one level, on another level, he's such an artist with so much integrity that I'll let him do it. Like I'm still interested in what an album David Lynch might put out, even though I don't even think he is a good musician in any sense that I, normally would associate that term. But I don't care because I think he's going to put out something good with his just with his abundance of good taste and artistic integrity. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you mean. Like he has that he has the amount of creative energy to put out an album, and even though the music might not be technically brilliant, it's gonna at least have some sort of universal truth to it. So
Yeah, and probably be original too. Like he's probably gonna, because he's interested in fucking around with forms and aesthetics. He's gonna make you hear something. I mean, that's to me that's the most interesting thing in any music is like, am I hearing something I haven't heard before? I love to hear something I haven't heard before, and I believe he could probably show me that.
yeah, no, like a lot of the tracks kind of reminded me of like the more industrial Tom Waits albums, like in a way, like they had that kind of weird, like maybe it was the singing that kind of pulled it that way, but also like some of the weird like tracks. They definitely gave me some vibes of like late Tom Waits albums, like late '90s, early 2000s.
I have okay. So here's one for you to chew on. It's I think we've been talking a lot about dichotomies and paradoxes. One thing that I also find kind of paradoxical is the darkness of David Lynch's work, and then the like Mickey Mouse character of David Lynch. Like when you whatever see him in interviews or see footage of him, like, and it even goes up to the point where I've heard him say that he talks about, if you only heard him talk about his movies and you never saw them, you would think that he makes like utopian psychedelic happy fantasies, because he's always talking about how beautiful the ideas are, and you get the feeling that he finds even these horrific things that he's always coming up with very, very beautiful, and he wraps his like spiritual positivity around the deranged shit that he's like coming out with and processing on screen. And I don't know if you wanted to comment on like, can those hideous things that he shows be beautiful, and is beauty a word you would associate with his aesthetic?
Yeah, well, like I when I went to a screening of Lost Highway last year, like the lady who was introducing the movie told a story about Lynch. So apparently, he was living. I don't remember where he was living, but this was like he was younger before Race Red came out, and he was his dad came to visit him, and in his basement, he was so excited to show his dad. In his basement, he had like everything, all these different vegetables set up, and they were like in various stages of decomposition, and he was like very like interested in like the way that things were decomposing. Like, was excited to talk about it with his dad. His dad was like, could not even fathom like why he was interested in that. And I think that kind of has to do with like kind of what I was saying at the very beginning. Like, there's absolutely, and I think Lynch's whole ethos kind of has tended towards this. There's like this beauty in decomposition. There's this beauty in recycling, and kind of that like the cycle of rebirth, not just in material things, but in ideas and in like forms as well. And to cycle that through, even with like using it through the imagery of like really heinous crimes or heinous or the brutality of humanity in general. I think it just serves to highlight that like good things can come out of bad habits.
I also think I think you're totally right on that, and I also think there's the level of where beauty isn't necessarily a good term. Like, if beauty just means kind of the awesome, right? Because that's a little bit more classical use of beauty as like things that are awe-inspiring, and the idea that I remember I had a poet friend who would always say beauty is oppressive, and that was like a big theme in his work, was like the oppression of beauty. If beauty is just like means something that makes you stand in awe and kind of robs you of your senses or gives you an experience of there's a particular word I'm looking for. Anyway, let's say awe. Anything that gives you an experience of awe can also be something horrible. You can get an experience of awe from the awful as well. And so if his idea of beauty is just something that's going to hold your mind, something that's going to like arrest you with its aesthetic power, that can also be horrible things too. And if so, from the point of view of an artist, those are beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you don't. Things don't have to be like music doesn't have to be sonorous to be beautiful.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be, like easy to digest to be, somehow like plaintive and understanding. Like you have to be able to struggle through something is sometimes the point.
Mm-hmm.
Not that like I think Lynch does a good job of making his things very, very like cinematic, interesting, and engaging. It's not like it's like some sort of really obtuse like I mean it like some sort of like weird performance art piece that you're gonna like have no basis of knowledge. Like it's touching into like base humanity, but in a way that like wants you to confront something within yourself.
That's right. I agree with that. The word I was looking for before was sublime. Like like this concept of sublime is something that's makes other things irrelevant, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like there's, I just think of, I to me, like looking at Lynch stuff, and I kind of go back to that image in Blue Velvet when it like drops below the surface and you see like all the worms and stuff. And even like the worms like festering on the ear. Like the whole like idea of things like coming full circle just has such a like, I don't know. It to me like it's a way of comforting through death. And I see like for some reason, and I don't know, like I haven't actually seen The Straight Story, and so like that's like one of the few things I haven't seen. I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen Dune.
Haven't seen what? You haven't seen Dune?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
But like partly that is just because like I don't know if I want to see the train wreck that is really
right.
But yeah, like and because that I feel like that's going to be when I do watch The Straight Story, that's a movie that I think is probably like the clearest expression of that, concerning like the realities of death.
Mm-hmm.
That like in general, like I think that that's a consistent undertone in the work that I find alluring and attractive.
Yeah, and it's also that same that same trademark of his is can you put a shirt on?
Sorry, I'm just gonna sit down instead of. Can you see? Okay.
He's classic. This, but yeah, you can wear that. It's also like a shadow projection. I think this goes back to him saying like, oh, the fact that you can put the worst imaginings on screen is like a way of confronting them and wrapping your mind around them. And if you want to go Jung style on it, it's like he's doing shadow projection and shadow work. But he's I see it as him doing it on behalf of all of us. Like sometimes he's like, the thing that you're not looking at, right? The part of life that you're denying, which is death, decay, fear, the worst imaginings in life. By insisting on not looking at it, it's growing, and you're feeding it negative power, right, of denial. So when he's like, we're going to look at it, it's not because he necessarily wants to magnify the negative, but he's just like, I'm shining light. I'm shining the light of awareness in towards this dark blind spot that we culturally seem to have around, basically anything negative, especially death.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's interesting that for Lynch, like I don't know, like I've never actually heard like an interview with him talking about like what his views on death are and like anything of that nature, but I do see that like even though he does shine a strong light on of death, and in this movie almost kind of like ego death, in an empire, but like more broadly just death in general. It seems actually to be a fairly positive, like, and it seems to resolve itself in a positive way. In most of his movies, I don't see a lot of like, really like just death and despair being a common, like that. Like,
Yeah.
To me, like I think it's more, like kind of death and rebirth.
Yeah, there's some triumphs. Although Mulholland Drive, it's quite dark. I mean, she shoots herself in the head. That's the last thing that happens in the movie. But just because there's one exception, I think your basic point is right. And Blue Velvet is like that. There's a happy ending. Blue Velvet's an interesting one though, because the happy ending almost kind of rings false a little bit in that movie. Like it's a little too trite, And in this one, it's uber trite, right? Like it's like Motown dance video at the end, like it's like
But I mean, even the scene before it, like the kind of the final scene where it's the I don't know, that music track reminded me of Good Beast. Like I don't even know what that's called. But like that whole like kind of image was, I thought, fairly beautiful and hopeful in a way.
Which one? Say to which image are you talking about?
Like when you're talking, like when Laura Dern actually does come in and hug the woman.
Oh yeah.
He's the like the child and the husband character, like are like kind of, I don't know. I honestly don't really know what that was about. Like, are they reuniting? Like with that? Like I'm not exactly sure.
Right.
But it was kind of just like series of images of like kind of resolution and like acceptance.
Yeah.
Throughout that, and then that song was kind of like, this very kind of melancholic but like hopeful type music, really despairing. But yeah, in the end, I think the thing is, I think that like you have this kind of like, if you want to call it like a Hollywood ending, and then of course over the credits you have to just put something that's like truly just like throwaway absurd, like just.
Like a coda, like just a in terms of the form, it's just like a little tail that's hanging off the thing.
You have to like, again, like what we were saying before, like spotlight the artifice, spotlight the like fleeting nature of film as just an artifact, and like throw it away.
Yeah, well, I'll say this: it's very satisfying. I have such a high regard for Mulholland Drive. I was ready to be like, okay, he can't do that again. He can't sustain that peak. And in some ways, I don't know that he does. But in some ways, I'm so ready. Like, one thing about the Lynch movies is you only get a couple goes, right? Once they become familiar, you're fucked. The strangeness and the novelty is part of how they work. So, in a way, that movie was more satisfying than the last time I watched Mulholland Drive, which was now my third time seeing Mulholland Drive, and it's starting to get a little familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. So just the fact that it was Lynch content I haven't seen was worth the price of admission,
Well, and kind of like vintage Lynch in the sense that like it's full bore Lynch. It's not like kind of like Wild at Heart like type Lynch. It's like
I haven't seen Wild at Heart, so you've seen it.
Yeah.
I can't find it. It's not on any platform that I know. When did you see it, and what did you think of it?
I saw it last year in Austin at a independent movie theater there. That was doing a show on it. They were doing it as like a Valentine's show. And I mean it's a good movie. That's kind of what I was thinking about when I was thinking about I won't spoil too much, but like death is kind of like a hopeful, like
Uh-huh.
death and rebirth thing. Is a what I find to be one of the themes of that movie. But I mean, it's definitely not surreal, and I mean, it's surreal in some ways, but it's
Hmm.
not even close to the levels of like abstraction
Hmm.
that Lynch would do in the next few movies. Like that, it
Hmm.
was kind of like it's more like Twin Peaks and less like like late David Lynch.
Have you watched Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me?
No, actually,
That's a really interesting one. In the overall like Lynch scale universe, it's pretty interesting because Twin Peaks has this quality that it's like Lynch, made for primetime TV.
right.
But in the movie, he goes back. Like he kind of takes it all back. It's very interesting. He the cutesiness is gone. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's one I do really need. That's definitely I
Do you
forgot.
like? I mean, you like Twin Peaks?
Yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, then see Firewalk with Me for sure.
I haven't seen um, the new ones. The,
No, I haven't seen him either. I
um,
also haven't seen the shorts, the Rabbit shorts. I still haven't seen Straight Story either.
you I mean, if you're looking for another just like short little piece of Lynch content, yeah, the What Did Jack Do on Netflix is a good little. I think.
Okay, yeah, I definitely am gonna look for it.
And actually, I would watch it soon because it definitely is. You'll see the like stark resemblance to the like interrogation scenes in an Empire. I like which are weird because there's no interrogation like you were saying. Like there's no
Right.
like she's just like like it's just exposition.
Yeah.
Like, pure exposition.
Yeah, and the first time I feel like it's a yeah, the first time you see her there, it's like you seeing a new side of her. Uh, I don't know how many different characters you'd say she plays in the movie. Like, I don't mean, it might just be one woman, but how many different like kind of personalities does she put on in the movie? I don't know, at least five or six. But that one is definitely very distinctive. Her in that room talking to him. The first time I see it, you're like, "Oh, who the hell?" It's almost like that moment in Mulholland Drive when Naomi Watts is a different chick. You're like, "Wait, who's this
Yeah, yeah.
Laura Dern?" Yeah,
It does feel like that. Like it does. And just like because we haven't really mentioned it too much, but like Laura Dern is like just like falls to the wall amazing throughout the entire
absolutely, absolutely both. And he does that. I mean, that's always was my take with Naomi Watts and Mulholland Drive too. So he has a particular power with getting these like marathon triumphal performances out of like lead females.
Yeah.
Uh, and apparently, I mean, like I've heard, my impression is that just like all the women who work with David Lynch just love him as a director. But he has some kind of uh, what's the word, simpatico that apparently is uh, makes him very well loved, from what I can tell.
Yes.
Well, I mean, Laura Dern has done at least 3 movies with him because I mean, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, and Inland Empire. So I mean,
Mm. Hmm.
that's a stretch. Especially considering, like, I mean, that's like spanning, most of her career.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
Um, there was something else about. Oh, you know who we haven't talked about at all though is Justin Theroux in this movie, and like, is there scenes where he's talking in a British accent? Am I tripping about that?
I, I honestly don't remember.
Like, I
Like,
swear, like I'll also granted I was high, so like part of it is my own like state in approaching the movie, but like I swear to God, like people's just voices, like basic accents, changed from scene to scene. I swear to God, there's a scene towards the beginning where Justin Theroux's character is talking in a British accent for no explicable reason. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
I don't remember that specifically, but I'm not putting it past like that definitely.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, like I feel like Laura Dern's like weird Southern drawl comes in and out. Like I know it's
For
I,
sure. For sure.
but, like I think there's if I wanted to track it, I'm sure there's times where it comes in compared to it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, both of them seem to have like a variable amount of southern drawl.
Yeah, because I mean, Justin Bro does too, and like because of course his character is supposed to. Be I don't remember if it does at the end when he sees her in the like reading room scene there and he like spurns her.
Mm-hmm.
If he had a southern accent, not scene or not. I wasn't paying attention to that. But,
That's another. Now he kind of links to the director's assistant guy because he's another person who talks about being good with animals, or they talk about him being good with animals.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like I guess that's another like there's clearly some sort of sub theme about animal behavior and animal nature. But
I took it as psychological. Like like he's good with animals means like he's good at, you know, what responding to people's animal nature, which is also why he's had this, all this string of hot chick lovers, and I think that all ties in.
kind of crazy kids sort of like
Hmm.
fascinating.
Speaking of which, the parallel that suddenly leaps to mind is Tiger King. Have you watched it?
Yeah, of course.
The weird parallel there between like training animals and like training women or training partners, like that subplot within that miniseries is also quite almost disturbing. I mean, definitely disturbing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the con man grooming gay lovers thing is like probably like the thing of that that's probably gonna stick with me the longest. To be honest, like of his character, like
Well, the thing that was really disturbing about that, the is I knew a guy like that, not the gay guy, but the the Bhagwan, the other guy in Florida with all the
oh right,
wives. In a very abstract way. When I say I knew a guy like that, what I mean is I knew a guy who was a dog musher, and he was really good at making his dogs do what he want because he was really good at like dominance assertion, energetically speaking, and but he was the same way to his girlfriend, and it was really gross and shitty. And like you were like, why doesn't she leave this guy? But it was because he was like he's like a manipulative, commandeering. He was a scary guy. He was kind of a scary guy to see in that light, to know. And so in Tiger King, I kind of saw resonances of him with this.
is this up in northern Alaska or is this like in?
Yeah, this was in Coldfoot. Yeah, he
Oh,
was awful. That guy sucked. He was really, he was shitty. Yeah, good times. See, he's one of those, but he's one of those people now. To go back to what I was saying earlier, he's one of those people who has a permanent like persona in my brain because he was such a scary, intense guy to know. I mean, I wasn't like ever in physical danger or anything, but like
right.
I still think sometimes about like what would Jacob Valet like if Jacob Valet knew where I was right now, what would I do? Like if Jacob Valet showed up at my house, what would I do? Isn't that crazy?
I don't honestly know if I've met really anyone that like strikes me that like
Maybe it's. I mean, granted, I'm not. I don't think you would probably find this guy like that. I keep in mind I'm a more impressionable. I don't know. I'm a bit of a romantic or whatever, but yeah, for me that's this. There's this guy. Yeah.
yeah, that's like it's interesting. Like yeah, I actually I had kind of forgotten about the like vagabond like creepy like uh,
Well, there's a lot. There's a guy in it who's like, I didn't want to know how he was training those tigers. Like, I wanted to know how the hell he was training those women.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
And you're just like, oh my god, that's so sinister.
But frankly, like that guy who was I think like the one in Ohio or whatever, like that guy was the most like out of all of the like big cat owners, like he seemed to be the most like at least honest with himself about who he was.
That's true. Yeah, he had a certain likability because of that.
Like he was at least like yeah I'm the shithead, but like that's what I am, and I like kind of
Yeah, I agree.
and I don't know. There's a part of me that respects people like that are like you know what like
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. Something about self-honesty, even if it's not really a savory person, is very admirable.
yeah
Because, I don't know, because, and we all know how much we're not. So it's, refreshing to see.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, buddy. Well, I think that we have got more analysis than you can shake a stick at, and I probably should hang out with my brother or whatever.
I need to go to
Hey,
bed.
hey! Don't put the end of this call on me.
You're helping me get off the phone.
Don't you dare put the end of that call.
No, I'm sorry. I have to. Can you hear him back there?
Yeah.
He's being sleechful. He's a very sleechful boy.
I'm sleeching here. I'm sleeching there. Sleech everywhere.
Okay, buddy. Thank you for watching that with me and being down to talk about it. That was super fun. That's like good old times. You and me watching a weird movie and then deconstruct it afterwards.
It was good to meet you.
Oh yeah,
Good to meet you, Henry.
we should do this again. Like, that was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Leighton's wants to say he's glad he met you too.
Yeah, it was good to meet you, and I'd love to do that three-way movie if you wanted.
Yeah.
He says
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm definitely down to do some more of these, like weird movies or satires or whatever we want. Like,
I'm into it.
No, I enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. It's you're one of my faves for stuff like that, buddy, and I miss you.
Yeah, me too, man.
Okay.
I'm just watching right now. That's weird time.
Yeah, speaking of decay and societal fracturing, like it's an ever relevant theme.
Maybe that's part of the reason why, like, this particular time I was watching it, and that's like where it really was going for me. I've just been thinking so much about kind of like the destructive nature of like alternative forms of communication and things like that, and like really like kind of destructive. That's the thing, is like kind of like Room 237. You can just kind of like the movie is so rich in imagery, you can take it and like
Yeah, that's right.
But,
Well, yeah, let's do another one. We can have Room 237 Club going on.
have you seen Room 237?
Leighton, have you seen Room 237?
I've heard you talk about it for sure.
He's heard me talk about it, he says, but I don't think he's seen it.
I remember when I turned that on, it was just really random. I was just like, oh, watch this. And then you were like, whoa, this is crazy.
Had you not, but you had seen it already before, right? I don't think you quite, that's not how it happened. You knew it was going to fuck with my head, because you were like, oh, Justin, like, you got to see this. Like, I need to show you this.
Oh, yeah, I was like, I like saw it in like the folders, and I was like, ooh, this will be fun.
Yeah, and sure enough, you were right, because that movie, like, yeah, that movie had me on a kick for months, and I love a good kick.
Well, we actually went into that one. I don't even remember what the guy's name was, but one blog on there that like the guy wouldn't decline to be interviewed for the movie. And
I read all that shit. Yeah. I did the same thing for Mulholland Drive the other day too. I think I have a little bit of an obsessive personality, I guess. there's a same site for Mulholland Drive. It's just like fan theory, huge early 2000s HTML blocks of text, like just like insanity cabinet.
I wanted there's for forever. I've actually every once in a while I Google it just to see if it exists, and I haven't been able to find it yet. But there's like one of the guys that they interview for 237 is talking about his forthcoming movie, Kubrick the Magician.
Yes.
And I've been able to actually find that movie, and I really hope it's actually forthcoming someday.
I think I have, but that guy, if you look up that guy's name, he does have movies released on Amazon. He has made documentaries that are on DVD.
Well, maybe I just have to search directly on Amazon.
Yeah, search, and you'd have to go back, look up Room 237 and make sure to find the guy's name. But if you type in his name on Amazon, you'll find it. They're mostly about Kubrick.
Really? He has multiple documentaries on Kubrick?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That warms my cockles.
Okay, buddy, it was good to talk to you.
I'll talk to you later, man.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.